What's up, Squid Schoolers, and welcome to another map mode of the day. Today's, as chosen by my Patreon supporters, is Snapper Canal Splat Zones. We've got a Splat Zones map this time. We're going to get to talk about a new mode here. If you would like some input on which map mode I cover on a given day, I'm going to try and do all of them, but this will be determining the order that I do them in. You can support me on my Patreon. The support is going to be really instrumental to being able to keep this channel going in the long term, and I'd love to be able to do that. Even if you can't support on Patreon, though, a like and a subscription goes a really long way. Really appreciate you guys helping me grow the channel. Let's get started talking about Splat Zones. If you haven't seen it before, highly recommend that you check out FLC's fundamentals videos on the different map modes. They are found on his Twitch channel, im_FLC, underneath highlights. If you just Control F and search for the word fundamentals, you'll find I think there are 6 of them. And a lot of what I say here is going to be based on his theory, so if you want to hear it from the source, that'd be a great place to do it, but I will do my best to cover it in a concise fashion, because watching all of those videos is going to take you out like 8 hours or something. They're fairly long, but they're definitely worthwhile if you're really interested in getting serious about the game. Let's talk about Splat Zones, because Splat Zones is going to work a little differently, and the concept of an objective line is not something that I think works quite as well with this. We're going to be kind of redefining the way that we think about the objective. Because the thing about an objective line is that it presumes that the objective moves. So in tower control, obviously, the payload moves. In Rainmaker, the Rainmaker moves. And granted, it can move a little bit off track, but there are a couple of tracks you're very likely to find it on, and you need to control the same amount of space to be able to be on that line. In Clam Blitz, you'd think, well, wait, isn't there just a basket that stays stationary? But hold on. The power clam does move. So while the basket is still closed, you can treat it very similarly to how you might treat something like Rainmaker. But once the basket is open, it actually plays kind of similar to Splat Zones, only maybe if the zone were in your base and they had to get to it or something like that. Splat Zones itself, because the objective does not move, it's always in the same place, you really only need to occupy sort of a binary position of being in control of it. I'm not exactly going to draw a line. I could do that, but here's the way the line would look. You kind of want to control this, and then maybe this on offense, and on defense, the way back in is to get control of this, which you'll have to do by whatever degrees of this and this you need. They're going to be really big lines that span the whole map, and that's not even that descriptive, because what does it mean to control all of this? If you have 2 members here, then you only have like 1 here and 1 here, and so coming out this direction, you have very weak control over this area here. So you could think about it that way and try and, compose a theory out of that, but I like looking at it using the concept of hot zones. This is a concept that FLC talks about in his Splat Zones fundamentals video. The concept of a hot zone is, what is the space on the map that really matters the most and therefore will be most contested? Well, to get there, let's think about what we need to do in order to control the zone. You want to have paint on the zone. That's how you score points in this mode. In order to get control of this, what do you need to do? Well, you need to be able to stand somewhere where you can paint this. There are a couple of different places where you could be. You could be on the zone. You could actually just plop yourself right here, and this is a pretty good location if your only goal is to be able to paint the zone. The problem with that, and the problem with basically any well-designed Splat Zones map, is that the zone, number 1, is going to be the place that the opponents are looking at the most, so you're very likely to just get shot by somebody if you're on the zone. And the second problem with that is that the zone is really disadvantageous. It's some of the lowest ground in the map. The only lower ground is this area over here, and this area over here is basically useless in Splat Zones. There's very little you're going to be doing there. At most, you're going to be pushing this way through it and ignoring everything over here for the most part. You have very low ground. You have very little cover. The only cover available to you is right here, and this cover doesn't actually play to your advantage, because this cover prevents you, if you're on this side, from painting this side of the zone. You need this paint to go down in order to be able to cap the zone the first time. You need about 75% of it painted, and there's enough of it over here that the opponents are going to control if they roll out here and you roll out here, that you're not going to be able to get full control of it. Standing on the zone is dangerous. It doesn't give you a lot to work with. It's not the optimal play. What you really want to get control of, if you're going to be able to paint the zone, is this area back here. This gives you a number of different advantages. Number one is that if you get splatted, there is a splotch of paint that forms around you that's fairly sizable, definitely significant if two teams are fighting over a patch of ink and just a little bit of paint goes a long way. If you put that paint on the zone when you get splatted, and that's paint for the enemy team, then they're very likely to be able to cap the zone, especially since you've just been splatted and your paint is removed from play. If you paint it from here, though, you no longer have to worry about that because that paint will just go down here in an area that's not the zone. So that's one small advantage to this. Another advantage is that you have a slight height advantage. It's not going to make a huge difference in a fight, but it can, against maybe you and the same kind of weapon, can make a slight difference. The big one, though, is escape routes. From here, you can actually just retreat because you have flat ground all the way. If you're on the zone, yes, you could jump up this ledge, but only if your feet are not painted the opponent's color. If your opponent throws a burst bomb at you right here, you can't jump over the top. You would have to maybe paint your feet and then go up over the top, and that amount of time is enough to get you splatted. This is less of a commitment. It allows you to move back. It also gives you access to this direction as well as this direction, so you can go multiple different directions either on offense or defense. So it's really this area here that is most important to control if you want to have control of the zones. Generally, if you just roll out from here and they roll out from here, nothing's going to happen until you can take control of their area on this side of the map. Once you can do this and force them to go backwards, or splat them and take them out of play, then you will have the painting power to be able to get control of the zone in the middle, and that's when you can start a scoring push, and that's when we go into offense mode. What actually matters then is the area on the map that gives you better control of these 2 points. So what is that area? Well, one of the best ways to flank to the opponent's side is across these jumps. So those 2 jumps are going to matter to some degree. It's not something you're going to want to necessarily station someone on because you can't paint the zone from here quite as easily, but you want to keep an eye on this area. So I'm going to draw the line to include it. This pillow right here we'll talk about as a strong position for attacking the zone and taking your opponent's side. So we're going to include that. This wall here gives you not a good right side peek. This is a left side peek, but it does give you an option for approaching here from cover. And so if we take that and just apply it to the other side, oh, and snipe is a place where backliners can potentially have an impact from. So we'll consider that to be a small part of it. And then if we just make that symmetrical with the other side, we end up with an area that looks about like this. So now what we've drawn here is the hot zone on the map. We've drawn the area that you and your team want to have majority control over in order to be able to keep the zone painted your color. How do we go about doing that? Well, we need to be able to interrupt the opponent's side, and so generally what you see happen is maybe a midline weapon goes this way, and we'll talk about this in more detail, and tries to attack this from this direction. And maybe you send a flanker over here and try to attack from this direction while you have some forward pressure from the front so that they can't just take your side for free. Once the zone does go over to one side or the other, you still need to control all of this, because as soon as any of this is breached by the enemy team, they have access to zone, they can paint the zone, they can neutralize the zone. If it's just one enemy player who decides to flank in here while you're not watching and starts painting, There is the option that you have, as long as you have, some players in more forward positions, to see on the screen, oh, the zone is getting capped the other direction. Let's turn around and look back at this. But even then, if they turn around and delete this player, now that might enable other enemy players to start pushing in this direction because this area is not being enforced anymore. You want to play a lot more conservative with how you control space. You get up to a certain point where it's pretty easy to defend their ways out onto the map, and then you stay there. Going for like a hard lockout starts to become disadvantageous. Because if you're trying to stand here, the opponents have high ground in this direction, they have high ground in this direction, they have right side peek and high ground in this direction, or if they don't want to take that fight, they can just avoid you and go out this way. And now you're not actually controlling space if, they get out to the zone and you're forced to just kind of run backwards and do something about it. If you're going to be here, you want to be, an ambush weapon that's going to count on actually getting a pick and standing to have an impact from there. So maybe something like a roller. Even then, against a good team, they're probably going to paint this out and spot you out, and there's not a lot that you're going to be able to do about that. So typically what's going to happen on a lockout is maybe you get someone up onto here, maybe you have like one or two people in this location, and somebody who is ready to rotate and stop this push maybe. This is about as far as you're usually going to go. And notice how close this is to the hot zone. This player can just drop off of snipe and be there. This player is basically already there. These two are not going to go very far up past it because they're giving their opponents advantageous fights if they go up there. You get maybe this much of the map, and that's about all you're really ever going to want to push for. You push this line further, any more forward, now this whole area is at disadvantage because they've had to drop off a ledge. This whole area is underneath two different sides of high ground where you're just going to get pinched out by like a squeezer up here and a jet squelcher up here or something like that. You lose advantages the further forward you push, and that's just good map design. You're really only going to want to hold them just off the hot zone most of the time. This is about all that you're going to be doing on offense, and on defense, you're probably going to see them here, maybe a couple players here, especially if they're ambush weapons. Maybe someone backed further up this way. It's usually more intelligent than to just put yourself here in a visible spot with no high ground. And so you're going to want to use this angle and this angle to flush players out into sight lines your teammates can hit. You're going to want to use this angle to prevent people from just retreating over to here. And you're going to be able to clear this area that way. And as soon as you've got that whole area cleared and backed up, you're right back into your street. And this is an area where you can start contesting the zone again. It really is about that simple. You might have someone to contend with here, you might have someone on the zone here, but you're going to be able to get pretty close to the zone pretty quickly, especially if you pop a special before you drop down over snipe or something. If they push in with specials with overwhelming force from here, they've got 3 players all armored up, ready to take you out. Instead of going down when they push you over this side, if you're on their snipe, you have the option to just drop down into street and run away and save your life and paint up this whole area and have specials, and then come in from this direction and try to retake the same area when their specials wear off. As soon as the enemy armor goes off, think very carefully about whether you want to take any fights. Armor is very common in this mode. It's very powerful in this mode. You'll even see teams running double armor in this mode because of how much of an impact it has. My cat just knocked something over. Armor is very popular. Missiles are also very popular because missiles are a displacement special. If you've got an annoying backliner in this position, if you've got someone who just will not leave from here and keeps getting a bunch of picks, if you fire missiles at them, number one, the direction that this guy is going to want to go is probably over here. And you'll get way too many picks on backliners because their teammate decided to drag missiles behind them while the backliner was still focused on another shot and tried to back up, didn't have time to get away from it. So, hey, if you're right here and you've got a backliner right here, do not drag your missiles to them, please. Backliners will thank me. But what missiles will do is force these players away out of the yellow zone. And that lets you and your teammates move into the yellow zone, take control of that, and start pushing back from there. Any other specials that you're going to use, they're going to be used for their standard purpose. If it's a displacement special, then use it to push people out of the way. If it's a painting special, like Inkstorm, for example, or Bomb Rush, then you're probably going to use that on the zone, but hopefully use it to take control of a little more than just the zone. So maybe you throw Rain over in this direction so that it both paints the zone and flushes people out towards about this radius right here. Lots of people have the misconception that Booyah Bomb is a painting special. Booyah Bomb paints terribly. It's very, very uneven, even in the large circle that you see there, and it paints slowly enough that even something like a typical shooter can just fire through and completely prevent the zone from even being neutralized from a Booyah Bomb. You're probably better off using your main weapon most of the time, because you're going to spend a good 5 seconds up in the air throwing no paint on the ground before you put that Booyah Bomb out. Consider that. Consider the time that you are not spending painting by charging the Booyah Bomb. Really, most of the time, Booyah Bomb is a displacement special. Rather than putting the Booyah Bomb here, consider putting the Booyah Bomb here. That means that anybody who's in this position has to make a choice. They either run to the right and still have some control over the zone, but presumably you have teammates waiting in these positions to mop them up, or they put themselves out of the hot zone entirely. That is going to allow your team to cap better than putting the Booyah Bomb on the zone. It's especially bad on this zone, because if you accidentally land the Booyah Bomb anywhere on the mid wall, it will activate higher up. And the Booyah Bomb, it's really hard to show on this map, but maybe I can draw it off to the side here. The Booyah Bomb is a sphere. Let's say this is the piece of cover, and I know it's not a perfect cube like I'm drawing it here, but if you put the Booyah Bomb here, it's going to form around the point where it lands. Well, this is the zone down here. Have you noticed the problem? Almost none of the zone it's getting painted. It's maybe like this little bit right at the bottom here. But if you land that any higher, even on the wall here, you're losing a significant amount of the painting radius because of elevation, because the center point is not on the ground anymore. So instead of getting all of this area around, you're only getting maybe all of this area around. So it's going to paint even less because of that piece of cover if you hit that piece of cover with the Booyah Bomb, which means that even if you are booyahing on the zone, you want to put it down maybe like here or here, and so it's not going to paint the whole zone, it's going to be cut off part way. Really, really bad idea to try and use Booyah just to paint the zone if that's your whole idea with it. Try and maybe paint the zone and push some players out of position. Or try and maybe just completely zone the enemy team out of painting it and let your teammates push up with it. So let's talk about what different weapons are going to be doing in the process of controlling the zone here. Like we've always said, Slayers, Skirmishers, your job is to push your team's zone of control further. Specifically, though, what that means for us is your job is either to push your way into the hot zone, or to prevent the opponents from having access to the hot zone. It's one of those two things. So that's always going to mean, you have an arc and you're trying to push your opponents back on it. But how you do that is going to depend on your location and what your team comp is built of, and a lot of other factors. Let's talk about the main ways that you're going to do this. If you are a mid-range weapon, this area right here is phenomenal, because you can use this here piece of cover to right-side peek around and hit a lot of this area. If you're left unattended, if they just decide to ignore you, you can paint this side of the zone. And remember how I said earlier that this particular part of the zone right here is especially difficult to get control of since the opponents can see it and for you it's behind cover? Well, this is one of the few positions that you can easily take as the offensive team. You can go out this way and probably be pretty uncontested doing that up until you get about here. And if you're able to stay in this spot, you get to just paint this for free as a mid-range weapon. And so your teammates paint from this side, you paint from this side, that's often a free zone cap, and they have to do something about you. And it's annoying that they have to do something about you, because you're off on the side over here. If you retreat, you're going into an area that's relatively useless for them to keep control of. You're retreating out of the hot zone, but you have very easy access back into the hot zone. So they have to maybe double commit to take you out of there a lot of the time. You can kind of walk back and kite back a shorter ranged weapon and have pretty advantageous fights if they try to go for you. And meanwhile, your team is going to be painting the zone while they push you over here. So this is a great position for a midline slayer or a skirmisher weapon, something that can use its range to get control of that area. And that's generally going to draw a good amount of aggro. So be ready to back up. Make sure you have an escape route. Have this kind of area over here painted up, so that when they do decide that they're sick of you being there, you have a way out and you don't just immediately go down and let them refocus mid again. As a frontline weapon, you have access to this right here. This is a good piece of cover for anyone to use in general, but since you're going to be looking more closely at the zone, you need to be closer to it to paint it. This is something that's really useful. This is something that can keep you safe from someone pushing in this direction, someone pushing across the zone, someone pushing from over here. You have a lot of different things that will protect you from, and so that's a good place to kind of set up shop at first. You have the option to potentially push up to here and use this piece of cover. Now again, if there is a midline weapon that is set up shop over here, dropping down over the ledge towards them is a huge commitment, and also if you don't have range advantage, you're probably going to get shot before you can shoot them. So you only want to go for this if you're seeing that the weapon matchup that you have over here is favorable to you, or if you have numbers. But this is an option. You can also try to push in and use this piece of cover. So if they're rushing to get to this point so that they can use the cover, but you're already here, you as the shorter ranged weapon are able to force them back. You might not be able to go in for the pick if they're smart and they back up fast enough, but you can at least push them out of the hot zone by getting to that position. I usually don't like to go for that as a short-range frontline weapon, just because, again, I'm going to get outranged and they're probably going to see me coming. They'll have seen me try that push 100 times before, or someone like me. So usually as the frontline weapon, what I'm trying to do is get this area under control, rather than try to maintain our own side. You can do that in a couple ways. If nobody does come out over here, if you're looking at the map and you're seeing, nobody's painting that, you can, in theory, just go straight out over here. This is also a play that you can go for if this player here happens to get picked and you were helping out with that fight and you're able to just kind of jump over straight away. And that's something that players aren't typically looking for when they're over here. A lot of the time, these players are looking this direction at the zone. And so if you go across, because of how this is elevated and there's a wall there, it takes some good awareness for these players over here to be able to see that. I haven't gotten, sniped out very often trying to go for this if we had a safe fight over here already. Usually, if this player here can have an impact, if it's like an E-leader and they can hit this far over the water, they're probably going to have already shown themselves and tried to do that while this fight was going on. So if that didn't happen already, then usually it's safe to get over here and start harassing from this side. And this puts some serious pressure on the players who are in this location. If you're over here, then that's going to force them to fight you and try and back up, or maybe go this way at best. Going this way isn't great for a backline weapon. That's going to expose them to a relatively easy push from players on this side. You were probably already in control of this side anyway if you put someone over here. There's a lot of issues to getting pushed that far away from your base as a backline weapon. So usually they're going to have to kind of back up. They're going to have to maybe see you coming and get out of the way and try to kite you that way. Or they're going to have to run up this and try to get high ground and use that against you. Maybe if there's someone up on snipe, that's someone who's going to try and deal with you there. But this forces them to respond. This definitely forces them out of this position, and that's really what your main goal has been. If you can accomplish that, then your teammates behind you on your side should probably be able to gain control of the zone from that amount of pressure. The other thing that I like to do as the frontliner is to roll out in this direction, and what you can often do is hide out behind this area here and rush into this direction when someone's not paying attention. You have to be very careful doing this. It is better suited to a midline weapon or something like a 52 gal that can put a wall up to protect itself, but a lot of the time you will catch people just looking this way or looking this way, and they're not ready for you to do something about them. Just make sure you don't overpush, because if there's a charger right here, this sight line is just not going to be safe. You need to be able to get into range before they even see you to have any impact from there. That's unlikely with a higher level charger player. You're going to need more of a group attack, maybe some pressure from over here first before this is going to do anything for you, or maybe someone getting around over on this side before you go in and try and flush that out towards them. If I can't get access to these two positions, that probably means we're on defense, because that probably means that if they have control of here, then they have taken control of our side street, and so we can't really be here safely. And if they've taken control of here, then they still have control of their side street. So if you don't feel like you can comfortably make one of those pushes, either on the far right or on the far left, consider that that probably means you're on the back foot here, and you need to work on clearing out this area and then this area for the rest of your team first. Once you have control of the zone, as the frontliner, it depends on what your weapon wants to do, where it's going to get picks from the best. If you're something like a roller or maybe like a tetradualies or something, getting right up here along these walls isn't the worst idea. Now, they're probably going to expect you to be there if they're an experienced player, and they'll probably try to paint this out. If you're doing this against a high-level competitive team, they're probably not going to get caught by your shark there, because they're going to look at the weapon comps and immediately know, okay, just don't go out there when I'm spawning back in. But even if this doesn't work, you also have the options to be sharking under here, even under here if you're expecting someone's going to come out from this direction. The entire line that they have to drop off from here all the way down is theoretically sharkable. You probably don't want to be doing that on the unpaintable turf here. Those two locations are probably not going to be safe. But if any weapon is not going to be seen there, it's probably yours, because you're probably just going to be in squid form right up against the wall. So, I don't know, you might catch someone dropping down, but probably just stay in your color ink along that wall. And that's one option you have. Buckets might also get some benefit out of maybe taking this sort of a position so you can slosh up over the top of cover. That's definitely, something that you could use to your advantage. If you have decent range, so maybe something like a 96 K-Pro, or especially backline weapons, if you're able to get them up here, are really nasty. This position gives you control of basically this much space. You're able to kind of get picks on anybody who's not dropping all the way out on this far side. So that's a really powerful position for you. It lets your teammates kind of deal with other areas of the map pretty well. Otherwise, sitting here is pretty good. Sitting behind here, if you don't have full control of this area, is pretty good, because maybe someone tries to drop down in this direction and maybe come around, and then if you step out, you have right side peek around this corner. So that can be a pretty strong way to hold for you. It's also not a bad idea to use something like an inkjet to get up over this ledge and dislodge backliners from this position. What you can often do is maybe flush someone out in this direction so that your teammates pushing in from here can catch them there. So that's something that you can potentially do. One niche idea that you have as a frontliner is if you expect that there's going to be a backliner here and that there's not going to be a lot of pushing power coming through in this area just yet, you can do the flank. So you paint up this wall, you paint the corner here, use that corner to jump across here, and sometimes you get the backliners back. Or sometimes you get shot by someone here, or sometimes someone's watching this corner and already gets you. But that is an option that is available to you that, depending on the situation, might find you some success, might disrupt their attempt to retake in this direction, and get your team some picks. This is something that I would probably only do in a situation where you already have a lot of control, so that you know that you have players here ready to defend in the event that the zone that you're enforcing, which is here, actually pushes them backwards into somebody, instead of making them just decide, well, if you're going to push me out of here, then I guess I'm going to the zone now, and now I'm going to take the position you don't want me to be in. Niche, but I wanted to throw it out there because it is a possibility, and it is something that I end up doing in one of these matches. But it's also important to remember that if your opponents do get out, they have a number of different directions they could go. They could go out this way, and this is a really popular direction to drop if you don't have a full lockout on their snipe. They could also just keep coming out here, and both of these will get you back to the hot zone pretty quickly. So you've got to watch out as soon as you think there's any kind of leak in your lockout that you're backing up and you're ready to contend with the hot zone. Because being right here does not help you if two opponents have dropped out here and retaking control of the zone. You're outside of the hot zone, you can't have an impact on that. Whereas if you had been, let me move this, back here, you might have actually been able to engage and help a teammate in that fight. So the further forward you get, the more you're putting on the line in the belief that you're going to be able to get picks. And the further back you stay, the better control you're going to have of the hot zone, and probably the more advantageous fight you're going to have against them. So again, that leads us to our idea of maybe keeping this arc under control and then being ready to back up just enough that you can, eat the pressure from a special push. So if they pop armor and they pop a booyah or missiles or something all at the same time, you don't want to be in this position right here. That's how you get picked and start off their push. Once they pop those specials, back up. And notice how I've backed up significantly, but I still haven't given up control of the zone. They can, drop out of snipe and land here. They can get control of their bunker. But once their specials are used to get that space, then they have no specials left. You can use your specials that you've been farming while you have been in control of the zone and been painting forward to push them right back into the position you wanted them in. If you are a Slayer Skirmisher and you're on defense, let's say there's a couple players maybe like here and here. Your backlines are not going to have a lot that they can do about that. They might be able to get up into this position and, establish some control over here. That's about the most they're going to be able to help you. They will probably need you to, flush these players out. So don't go and stand by your backlines, because then everyone can just worry about someone from the same location. Come out from a different angle. If you drop down from here and pressure this guy to run out this way into your charger's line of sight, that's a much more consistent way to get a pick than if you just all stand in the same place and somebody, under here with a roller forces both of you back. But be very, very careful how you drop. You are going to have to drop eventually. That goes without saying. But if this area is painted the opponent's color, paint it back first. Stand way back here or behind cover even, and just paint up over the top and just barely scrape that area. Make sure that there is not a roller or something trying to ambush you in that position. If they have a different team comp which doesn't include a weapon like that, okay, then go for it. Just kind of drop down. When you drop, make sure it's safe, and then once you know you're safe, use your position to funnel the opponents into a pincer movement with your teammates. That's going to mean that you all have to go at about the same time. Timing is really important. And a lot of the time, the way that that's going to happen in solo queue is that you're going to have to paint for special, wait for someone to pop a special like an armor or something, a go time button, then use that as your cue to move in and start pressuring opponents. Something like an armor on this map, you're going to want to paint for a lot of armors so that you can make a lot of pushes like that. And you're going to have a lot of opportunities to paint because this objective is based on painting. As long as you are not locked out, you as the support, and I guess we might as well move to support at this point, you as the support are going to get a lot of access to paint that you can undo. It's really crucial as the support that you are not just painting random corners of the map that don't matter, because the enemy support is going to paint the zone. And that way they're getting special and they're getting zone control. They're getting objective control. Or they're going to paint the hot zone. And now they're getting special and they're getting control of a strategically important location. You out over here, I don't care, Mr. Neo Sploosh, how many missiles you had on the end screen. Because you may have gotten 16 missiles, but you're probably going to have a KA of 3 for all the good that those missiles did for you. What you really want to be doing is getting all of that special charge, which there is in abundance, by painting something that's relevant that your teammates are going to have to fight for. So if you're fighting over this area and your opponents are painting back and shooting it, you look at your opponent's paint and you go, oh, hey, free special charge, neat. And the faster you get those specials, the faster you're going to be able to give your frontliners that boost that they need to start pushing out of your base and the sooner your backliners are going to be able to get in a position where they can do anything to help you. Your backliners really need to get out to a position like this or a position like this to really have a significant impact once you start getting towards the hot zone. And so your slayers and skirmishers need to push in with that, but in order to be able to have a safe fight, oftentimes it's going to take a special from the support to get them that extra, 15% that they need to have advantageous fights in front of them. Once the zone is secured, you as the support should never stray too far from the zone, because remember, you're the best painting weapon on the comp, so who's best to be contesting the zone? Well, definitely you. Not only are you the best painting weapon on the comp, but in all likelihood, you're not the strongest fighting weapon on the comp. The strongest fighting weapons on the comp are not going to have paint that spreads out, that's going to have a lot of aim RNG. That's what makes the arrow spray so good at painting, and so god-awful at fighting. It's that it has a really wide paint spread. Something like a Splattershot Junior just does not have the attack range or the aim accuracy to stand up in a fight in a 1v1 versus one of the meta frontliners. So instead of trying to take that kind of fight and dying and not being able to have armor and the team losing a lot of its painting power, you're better served by taking a position that's a bit closer to the zone. And that's not saying you have no impact on fights. You can chuck bombs up here, or you can chuck bombs over here, or you can maybe stay over here and have access to this with your bombs. You can do things that give your frontliners advantages, but you're sacrificing too much by risking yourself to have a one-for-one trade with an opponent. And mind you, in a 1v1, you probably just get picked cleanly because your weapon is a little bit weaker. So keep yourself safe, protect yourself, because your ability to paint and provide specials is worth more than the extra combat utility you would bring if you were pushing up out of the hot zone. Stay in the hot zone, be your teammates' rock in terms of objective control. Make sure that, if the opponents are pushing in, you're keeping yourself safe, but still getting paint down to make sure this at least stays neutral long enough for your teammates to double back from their more advanced positions and help you out with those fights. Backliners. First of all, we'll start by showing you guys Devi's positioning map. This is a relatively strong backline map. The nice thing about a backline weapon on this map is that you're going to be able to control multiple lanes of approach for your opponents at the same time. Let's say that you are standing, say, here. From this position, you have control over this whole lane here, that pesky midline weapon that we were talking about earlier. You are the strongest counter to them because you outrange them and you can hit them from all the way over on this spot, and you can force them outside of the hot zone. But you also have control of this side. And you can also see somebody who's coming at you from this side of the zone. And if someone comes at you from this side of the zone, you're far enough away from them that you're able to just back up and not be afraid of them yet. So that's a really powerful position. That gives you an angle on all of the things that could be happening at that point in time. And really, the way that you beat this is by throwing a special at it to force it out of position and make it unable to hold one of those areas for some amount of time, and to get someone over in one of these directions to deal with them while they're displaced. But even if this player gets pushed, you can back up to a position like here, or you can just back up straight all the way back to snipe, because snipe is also a pretty good location. If the opposing team gives you access to it, this area is also a relatively strong position for about the same reasons. You have access now to this lane, which for a super backline weapon, you put a Hydra or an A-leader here, this is really scary because this threatens this piece of cover, which is one of the strongest options that players have to push in from that direction. So that's a good, slightly more aggressive position to take. It still gives you control of this side if someone's trying to push you from over there. And it also will give you some access to this, so you deny this approach to the opposing team. So those are both really solid defensive options. And then, if you're on defense, so if you don't have control of all of the hot zone, being up here is really strong because you can clear this area out for your teammates. That area, of course, like we've mentioned, really, really important for being able to control the zone. And if you are able to have kill threat on somebody who's down here who would threaten your teammates from controlling that area, now they're able to push in, take control of that area, and you have access to the zone again. You can at least neutralize if you're able to hold from this position and nobody's able to dislodge you with specials or bombs or anything like that. So those are all really solid defensive positions. On offense, you have a few options for how to lock out. One is to stand on top of here. That's actually really solid for a weapon that has good range because it has visibility on the entire hot zone. A weapon with decent enough range can hit literally the entire thing, aside from like this piece of cover here, this piece of cover here, maybe someone who's back here at this angle. That's about it. Everything else you can hit from there. So that's a really powerful position. Now, this isn't a very easy position necessarily to hold, because if I see a Hydra there, first thing I'm thinking to do is fire missiles at it. So you got to watch out for the push back in, but if maybe you are standing on the grates down here and they don't see you, and then you hop back up on the wall when it's too late for them to disengage, that can be powerful. If you're hiding behind this column, that can sometimes work. That can be a powerful place to try and hold. One other place that works pretty well is to stand over here. Because you think about the lockout situation, where are they going to be trying to come out? A lot of them are going to try and drop out here, and then some of them are going to try and drop out here. Well, from this position, you're able to see both of those. You've got this kind of zone right here. Being there, it gives you an escape route back so that if you get pressured, you can still retreat and still be in the hot zone, and maybe that means you take this position here. So this is also pretty viable. Now, there's one more position that, depending on the weapon, can be pretty brutal. If you put something like a heavy splatling, so ballpoints, hydras, heavies, up on this position, this is a nasty lockout, because they can probably hit whatever's coming at them. Only time you don't want to do this is if they've got a charger of some kind that can actually one-shot you. But anything else that you can outrange or out DPS is just not going to be able to do anything from there. I played with Devi for a long time. Devi was a Hydra player. Whenever we were able to get Devi up onto this position, number one, the game ended very quickly. Number two, she always top fragged. While this is risky and this requires you to have a bit more advanced of a line past the hot zone to be able to pull off, that is an extremely powerful point of control, and that can be a lights out sort of position to take as the backline weapon. We've already talked quite a bit about key positions, but we will go over them really quickly. Firstly, this position right here is one of the strongest positions that the defense has access to. It's very, very close to their spawn, so it's easy to get to, and it is impossible for the enemy team to contest. So uncontestable high ground, always going to be something that favors the defending team. You get some like a squeezer right peeking down this direction. They can hit most of snipe, and that can be the cover fire that is needed for a frontline weapon to push up into here and clear out the rest of snipe. Because snipe is important. It is high ground that you have over anybody who is going to drop down from any of these directions. So that's going to be crucial to clear out, and one of the best ways to do that is by taking this position right here. Another thing about snipe is that if you are able to get at least most of the control of it, even if you have someone maybe over here, this allows players to sneak out on the left-hand side, and that will give you another angle onto the zone. It'll let you start broaching the hot zone here. Maybe you push out to here, maybe you push down this way, maybe you push over here and meet the opponents in between you and your teammates as they push in. You have a lot of options there. After this, the next thing you're going to be worried about as the defending team trying to push back in is bunker. Typically, you're not going to see like a backliner stand straight on this because of the lack of escape routes. You're going to have to like jump across or scoot around this cover in a pretty exposed location. So that's something that's usually going to get bombed out or hit with specials or something. That's why this position is a little bit more common. But you still need to clear it out of something like a midline weapon or even a short-range weapon, because if you're a short-range weapon and you're right here, the player here has a bit of an advantage over you because of the height, the extra range. That's something to bomb and get cleared out, force them back over the jump, give yourself some space. And once you've got that done, you know that they're over here which isn't a super relevant position to your push in this direction, and so you're going to be able to get stuff done there. Again, we've talked about this, and especially how this piece of cover is so critical to having control of this, so we're not going to spend too much more time talking about that. This piece of cover is really important. That annoying midliner is going to take that, and so this right here is one of the best staging grounds for leading an attack on them. Usually it's going to be maybe one person coming around from this direction and one person either coming over the top here, or what usually works more successfully but is harder to coordinate is coming out from this direction so that they're at a little bit more of an angle. If you really want to go the long route, you could come down this way, and a lot of the time the midliner doesn't even see that coming because it's so far out of their line of sight. They're focusing on the zone here, all of a sudden someone's on the hill and already shooting them. So that's something that can work if you've got the time, but it's a really big commitment to have to go all the way out from base to over here just to dislodge one player, the entire time you being off the objective line, not helping anyone get control of this zone. So you've got to weigh the choice to flank against the amount of time that you're going to be spending away from that hot zone. Once you get to mid and you have more control of the zone, remember that this side of the zone is going to be difficult to paint, which means that this is going to be your next objective. And from there, it's going to be symmetrical as you push your way back out. You're going to want control of this. You're going to want to get control of this area. Once you have control of this area, you're at a disadvantage against people who are up here and over here. And so you start pushing them back, and you try and take control of their snipe to start a lockout. If you get control of these areas, but you no longer have the numbers advantage to fight all of this, this is the point where you try and stall out. You take a position a little bit further back. You watch for this flank, and you just try and get specials so that when they start pushing in force, you're able to eat a little bit of pressure before they get to the zone, wait for reinforcements to come in, and have more of your own specials by the time they do come in. Better to give up going from here to going to here than to die and confirm their guaranteed cap of the zone because you don't have enough paint to put down on the zone to help them anymore. Always, at all times, when you are in control of the zone, be looking at the heads-up display. As soon as you see it starting to shift over to the other team, you know that somewhere along the line, your lockout has been broken. They are in the hot zone. Whatever you are doing right now outside the hot zone is not as important as keeping them pushed back out of the hot zone. So being right here, you see that the zone is starting to get capped. It doesn't matter that you are successfully skirmishing against these two players because you're still losing control of the zone. So just back up, give this space up, try and collapse with your teammate on this guy, create a 2v1, and then if you're able to take them out, now, even though you've surrendered a bunch of space on the enemy snipe doing so, these guys still can't actually get to the zone. They can get maybe to about here, but then they run into you again. So this is still the correct play. It keeps the enemy team off the zone the best. Main goals. Biggest deal is to keep control of these two areas. These are called street. If you can keep control of those you can keep control of the zone. To keep control of those areas, you need to have control of this area in red. That's called the hot zone. Frontliners and skirmishers, your job is to clear people out of the yellow. And to do that, you're going to take, space in the red as much as you need so that you can have control over that area. Once you do have full control, you're probably going to push the majority of the enemy team back in this direction. If you can control this area right here, like I've said, for any length of time, you're really capable of winning the game. And even if you lose a fight, if you're able to keep this dropped back to about here and then get reinforcements and push it back in, that's the way you're going to get those really quick KOs. That's what's going to happen to you if you end up against a really much stronger team and they're good and coordinated. They're going to keep this line between here and here when they're at disadvantage and then push it back up because they made you waste your specials, gaining the advantage, and they've got specials now and they can push you back into disadvantage. One last thing that really does matter in every single mode, but I want to point out, especially for Splat Zones, is that you really should pay attention to the team comp that you are given on your way out. Let's say you play K-Shot. There are some situations where you are the best painting weapon on the team and you really need to play support. But there are other situations where you have a good enough amount of paint, but maybe not a lot of weapons that are capable of pushing the objective forward. Depending on what comp you get, you might be the player who's responsible for painting the zone, but you might also be the player who's responsible for pushing people off the zone. And you'll need to kind of read your comp and read their comp, see what positions they are going to take. For example, they take this position with an E-leader, that cuts off a lot of your angles of approach. Make sure to, know which side of the map the backliner is on so you can be out of their line of sight. Looking at both team comps at the very beginning is going to be extremely important for you to know what your win condition is, for you to know when you're going to want to pop your specials, where you're going to want to position. I can't give you much more specific feedback than these main goals unless I know what weapon comps we're looking at. So make sure that you are collecting that information at the beginning of each match and using that to decide how you're going to approach the taking of those zones. That's about all I've got. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed our first Splat Zones episode here. Hope you learned something about the mode and about this map. If you would like any input on which map mode we do next, remember, I give that option to my Patreon supporters. There's a poll that goes out every so often to let them choose, and this was one of the ones that scored very highly on that poll, so that's why I'm doing it. So if you want that sort of input, support me on Patreon and help me keep this channel running. And even if you can't, it is still massively appreciated to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, help the channel grow. I'm really hoping to keep this thing alive up until Splatoon 3 so that we can hit the ground running and have a lot of useful resources for people already available when they start trying to learn that game at a competitive level as well. Thank you everybody for watching. My cat says goodbye too.